This is the story of how the company that invented the modern smartphone might be destroyed by the technology revolution it failed to see coming. Apple carries a valuation of over $4 trillion and powers more than 2 billion active devices around the world. Back in 2011, they created Siri, the first mainstream AI assistant, and that's what makes their current position so alarming. Apple's own internal research concluded that the company trails AI leaders by at least 2.5 years, and that assessment came from Apple itself, not from critics or competitors. ChatGPT now outperforms Siri by 25% on accuracy and answers 30% more questions correctly. The revolutionary Siri upgrade Apple promised at their 2024 developer conference has slipped to spring of 2026, nearly 2 years behind schedule, and internal testing reveals the new features work only 67 to 80% of the time. December 2025 brought another bad sign when Apple's AI chief John Giannandrea quietly departed after losing CEO Tim Cook's confidence. What should terrify every Apple investor came from Eddie Q, Apple's services chief, who warned internally that the company risks going the way of BlackBerry or Nokia if it doesn't adjust quickly. BlackBerry and Nokia were the companies the iPhone destroyed. Today, we're breaking down exactly how artificial intelligence threatens Apple's entire business, from Siri to the iPhone to the App Store. We'll examine why Apple fell so far behind, what the competition is building, and whether there's still time to recover. Understanding Apple's current crisis requires understanding what happened to Siri. Apple didn't just enter the AI assistant market, they invented it. Siri launched on the iPhone 4S in 2011 and genuinely changed how people thought about interacting with their phones, giving Apple an enormous head start over everyone else. And then, for over a decade, they did almost nothing with it. Employees inside Apple now call the AI and machine learning group AIMLess, which isn't a joke but an actual internal nickname. Siri became what insiders describe as a hot potato that gets passed between teams without any meaningful improvements ever sticking. Google Assistant now leads with 92.4 million American users compared to Siri's 87 million. But the truly damaging number shows up in market share. Siri controlled 16.9% of voice assistant users in 2020, and that figure collapsed to just 3.8% by 2024. Apple invented this entire category and now holds less than 4% of it. TechRadar ran head-to-head testing where Siri succeeded at only 13 out of 25 tasks while giving bad answers on 7 others, and Samsung's Bixby won that comparison. Google Assistant achieves 92.9% accuracy while Siri manages 83.1%, and the average Siri response runs just 15 words compared to Google Home's 41. Apple's internal large language model, called Ajax GPT, performs 20% worse than OpenAI's GPT 3.5, a model that debuted back in 2022. Apple is losing to technology that's already years old. What explains this decline from industry pioneer to embarrassing also ran? The dysfunction runs through every level. Removing the word "hey" from Hey Siri reportedly took over 2 years to accomplish, 2 years to delete a single word, and one senior director called the situation ugly and embarrassing. The real scandal emerged from WWDC 2024. Apple demonstrated an amazing new Siri that could access your emails, find flight data, pull up lunch plans, understand context, and work across apps. The demo looked incredible and suggested Apple had finally caught up. According to the information, that demo was effectively fictitious. Features showing Siri accessing emails and plans came as a surprise to members of the Siri team who had never seen working versions of the capabilities. The only feature actually functioning in that demo was the glowing, colorful border animation around the screen. Apple showed the world a product that didn't exist and built an entire iPhone marketing campaign around AI features that wouldn't be ready for the phone's launch. Luke Julia, one of Siri's original co-designers, put it bluntly when he said, "They are falling behind because of this fear of not being perfect." That fear of imperfection cost Apple years, and those years may have cost them their future. Siri's embarrassing decline might seem survivable since Apple still sells hundreds of millions of iPhones and the hardware business appears safe, but that assumption deserves serious questioning. Very smart people are betting that AI will fundamentally change how humans interact with technology, and that change might not involve smartphones at all. The first wave of AI hardware failed spectacularly, and the lessons from that failure matter. Humane AI Pin was supposed to represent the future, a screenless, AI-powered device worn on your chest that would replace your phone with voice and gesture controls. The company raised hundreds of millions in funding, employed ex-Apple staff, and generated enormous hype. What actually shipped totaled only 10,000 units against a goal of 100,000, and YouTuber Marques Brownlee called it the worst product I've ever reviewed. Between May and August 2024, more units came back as returns than went out as sales, and the company eventually sold to HP for $116 million, a fraction of the $750 million to $1 billion they wanted. Rabbit R1 generated more initial excitement with its bright orange design and over 100,000 pre-orders at $199, but reviews turned brutal once people actually used it. The device ran on a single Android app, supported only 4 apps at launch, and suffered from hard-coded API keys that exposed user data. Apple fans might feel smug about these failures, but here's what they shouldn't ignore. Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses sold over 2 million pairs and drove 210% year-over-year growth in the smart glasses market. Meta controls over 60% of that market and plans to produce 10 million pairs annually by 2026. Mark Zuckerberg expects these glasses to make Apple Meta's primary competitor over the next 10 to 15 years. AI glasses that work, that people want, that sell in the millions represent an emerging platform, not a failed experiment. The development that should really worry Apple arrived in August 2025 when OpenAI acquired Jony Ive's startup for $6.5 billion. Jony Ive designed the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. The man responsible for the most iconic product designs in tech history now builds AI hardware for OpenAI. Sam Altman confirmed they're creating a device intended to replace smartphones, saying, AI needs a new terminal because it changes the way people interact with computers from the ground up, and voice will be the key. The designer who created Apple's greatest products is building the device meant to make the smartphone obsolete, and he's doing it for Apple's most formidable AI competitor. Apple's services segment generated $96.17 billion in fiscal 2024, representing almost 25% of total revenue, with a gross margin of 73.9%, making it Apple's most profitable business by far. The App Store alone facilitated $1.3 trillion in developer billings in 2024, and Apple takes up to 30% of that total. This cash machine funds everything Apple does, and AI agents are coming to destroy it. The current model works like this. You want to book a restaurant, you open an app. You want to order groceries, you open an app. You want to book a flight, you open an app. Every time you open that app, you're inside Apple's ecosystem where every transaction can be taxed. AI agents flip that model completely. OpenAI launched Operator in January 2025, an AI agent that autonomously browses the web and completes tasks including restaurant reservations, flight bookings, grocery ordering, and shopping, achieving an 87% success rate on live website navigation tests. Google built Project Mariner as a Chrome extension that completes 10 simultaneous background tasks with 83.5% accuracy. The problem becomes clear when you trace the transaction. When an AI agent books your restaurant reservation, you never open the restaurant's app. When it orders your groceries, you never open the grocery app. When it books your flight, no app was involved at all. The agent just handled everything. Dr. George Meyer of the London School of Economics Business Review described what's coming when he wrote, "We are likely to see a more fundamental shift in how users interact with digital products and services, away from using apps for many common tasks to using AI agents as the primary way to interact." His projection warns that entire sectors may have to rethink how they generate revenue in a world where the app itself is no longer the gateway. Apps becoming irrelevant means Apple's 30% cut becomes irrelevant too. And this is where it gets worse because regulatory pressure already squeezes the App Store from another direction. The Epic Games lawsuit resulted in Apple being found in contempt for willfully violating court orders, and external purchases now fall exempt from Apple's commissions in many cases. A UK tribunal ruled Apple overcharged £1.5 billion to 36 million UK consumers and determined that fair commissions should run 10 to 17.5% rather than 30%. The EU's Digital Markets Act forces alternative app stores and payment methods. Apple fights a two-front war where regulators shrink their cut from one side while AI agents eliminate the need for apps from the other. A business generating almost $100 billion annually at 73.9% margins stands directly in the path of this disruption. Apple announced Apple Intelligence at their June 2024 developer conference as their answer to ChatGPT, Google's AI, and the entire AI revolution. The launch came in October 2024, 4 months after the announcement and after the iPhone 16 had already shipped. Apple marketed the iPhone 16 heavily around AI features that literally weren't available when customers bought the phone. When Apple Intelligence did arrive, the features included basic writing tools, notification summaries, and mail prioritization. ChatGPT integration came in December 2024, but the promised Siri overhaul with contextual understanding, cross-app actions, and on-screen awareness got pushed to spring 2026. The features that shipped managed to embarrass Apple. Notification summaries generated completely false headlines, claiming Luigi Mangione had shot himself, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had been arrested, and that Rafael Nadal came out as homosexual. None of that was true because the AI was hallucinating fake news. The BBC complained publicly, Reporters Without Borders called on Apple to suspend the feature, and Apple quietly disabled notification summaries for news apps in iOS 18.3. The capability gap between Apple and competitors is staggering. Apple's on-device model runs approximately 3 billion parameters, while GPT-4 exceeds 1 trillion. Apple is building a bicycle while the competition builds rockets. Apple can't even compete globally because Apple Intelligence remains unavailable in China, with regulatory approvals still pending and blocked on iPhone and iPad in the European Union due to Digital Markets Act concerns. China serves as Apple's most important growth market and the EU ranks among its largest, yet Apple Intelligence doesn't work in either. The talent situation adds another dimension to the problem. July 2025 brought the departure of Roming Pang, leader of Apple's foundation models team, who left for Meta with a compensation package reportedly worth over $200 million, and approximately 10 to 12 other top AI engineers left with him. Apple is losing its best AI people to competitors willing to pay whatever it takes. Usama Fayyad, director of Northeastern University's AI Institute, didn't soften his assessment when he said, "This is an admission of a bit of weakness and failure on the part of Apple regarding their OpenAI partnership." He continued saying, "They basically said, okay, we're going to try and detect when Siri is not getting the right answers, and we will call ChatGPT, and that's an admission we haven't invested and that we've fallen behind." When your AI strategy amounts to calling your competitor every time you fail, the competition has already won. China shows what happens when Apple can't compete on AI, and the situation there approaches the existential. iPhone shipments in China fell 17% year-over-year in 2024, marking the largest annual decline Apple has ever recorded in that market. Apple dropped to third place behind Vivo and Huawei, with market share falling to 15%. First quarter 2025 brought even worse news when iPhone shipments reportedly crashed from 3.75 million to 1.89 million units, a decline of approximately 50%. Huawei drove this collapse by resurging with homegrown 5G chips and AI features, while patriotic buying amid US-China tensions pushed consumers toward domestic brands. The critical disadvantage for Apple is that Apple Intelligence doesn't work in China at all. Chinese competitors ship devices with functioning AI built in, while Apple fights with one hand tied behind its back. Apple has held talks with Alibaba, Tencent, and ByteDance about local AI partnerships, but nothing has materialized. Canalys analyst Toby Ju described the challenge when he warned that Apple's premium market position faces multiple challenges, including Huawei's continuous flagship releases, the proliferation of domestic foldable phones in high-price segments, and Android brands building consumer loyalty through technological innovations. China was supposed to be Apple's growth engine, but instead it's becoming a preview of what happens when Apple can't compete on AI. Professional investors who analyze Apple for a living remain deeply divided on the company's AI future, and that division itself sends a message. Apple's analyst recommendation consensus dropped to 3.9 out of 5, its lowest level since early 2020. Only 55% of analysts tracked by Bloomberg recommend buying Apple, compared to 90% or higher for Nvidia, Microsoft, and Amazon. Apple has become the AI skeptic among the Magnificent Seven. Bearish analysts speak openly about their concerns. Jefferies analyst Edison Lee maintains an underperform rating with a $205 price target and states that current smartphone hardware requires rework before being capable of serious AI. MoffettNathanson's Craig Moffett downgraded Apple to sell in January 2025, describing the outlook as decidedly unattractive and citing lukewarm consumer response to AI features. Dave Mazza, CEO of Roundhill Investments, put it directly when he said, "Until that changes, I think they're going to be looked at as a loser." That word attached to Apple feels jarring. Bullish analysts exist, but their optimism comes with conditions. Wedbush's Dan Ives maintains a $350 price target and predicts AI monetization could add $75 to $100 per share. Morgan Stanley's Eric Woodring projects Apple will become a leading distributor of AI technologies with a Siri re-release in spring 2026. Gene Munster from Deepwater Asset Management predicts Apple will be the best-performing Mag 7 stock in the first 6 months of 2026, but his caveat reveals the pressure Apple faces. His exact words were, "They've got to deliver a 10 out of 10 when this new Siri comes out. 10 out of 10 is the bar Apple must clear. Shipping a pretty good Siri won't count as a win because after years of failure and broken promises, anything less than perfection might not be enough." Supply chain analyst Ming-Chi Kuo offered the most sobering view when he wrote, "Despite the initial buzz following Apple Intelligence's debut at WWDC 2024, its appeal has significantly declined compared to cloud-based AI services which have advanced rapidly," and concluded, "There is no evidence of Apple Intelligence's ability to benefit hardware replacement cycles or service business. No evidence that Apple's AI actually helps sell phones or services. That's the reality facing the company today." Everything in this video has explained how Apple faces serious trouble, but the case for survival deserves consideration because Apple has faced these moments before. The iPod wasn't the first MP3 player since Rio Creative and others existed for years before it, but Apple entered late and sold 450 million units while dominating digital music for over a decade. The iPhone launched into a market controlled by Nokia and BlackBerry, companies that dismissed it publicly before being destroyed within years. Apple Music arrived 7 years after Spotify and still became the second largest streaming service with 88 million subscribers. Apple's pattern involves entering markets late and winning anyway. They wait, they watch, they learn from others' mistakes, and then they execute better than everyone else. The Apple Maps disaster of 2012 offers both a warning and hope. The launch went so badly that CEO Tim Cook issued a rare public apology and recommended customers use competitors' apps. Apple spent billions rebuilding Maps from scratch, and by 2020, Apple Maps had completely new ground-up coverage of the United States. That disaster also pushed Apple to introduce public beta testing for the first time. Apple can learn from failure, and the question becomes whether they have enough time. Apple's advantages remain strong. Over 2 billion active devices provide unmatched distribution, while the neural engine processes 35 trillion operations per second on the latest chips. Cash reserves exceed $130 billion for AI investment, and a services ecosystem with over 1 billion paid subscriptions creates enormous switching costs. Privacy could become Apple's differentiator because Apple's private cloud compute encrypts data, processes it, and immediately deletes it, unlike competitors whose business models depend on collecting user data. One analyst noted that, because of its existing ecosystem, Apple should gain more benefits from AI than many competitors at a fraction of the cost. If AI privacy scandals emerge, and they probably will, Apple's approach could suddenly look very attractive. Morgan Stanley bets on this scenario and projects Apple could move from AI laggard to leader in 2026. Analyst forecasts project iPhone shipments of 243 million units in 2026, with a bull case of 270 million if the AI story delivers. The window is closing fast. Apple faces its most dangerous competitive threat since the iPhone launched, an AI revolution it didn't see coming and still can't catch up to. The company that invented the modern AI assistant now trails the competition by over 2 years. Features promised repeatedly have been delayed again and again, while the upgrade supposed to save everything won't arrive until spring 2026, and internal tests show it works properly less than 80% of the time. ChatGPT reached 800 million weekly users, while Google Gemini replaces Google Assistant across Android. AI agents are beginning to bypass apps entirely, and OpenAI hired the designer of the iPhone to build whatever comes next. Former Apple CEO John Sculley called OpenAI Apple's first real competitor in many decades. Mark Zuckerberg described the competition with Apple as a very deeply values-driven and ideological competition around what the future of the tech industry should be. Inside Apple, the services chief warns that the company risks going the way of BlackBerry or Nokia. BlackBerry and Nokia didn't see the iPhone coming until it was too late. They had years of lead time, billions in resources, and dominant market positions. None of it mattered. Apple has until spring 2026 to prove the skeptics wrong. Analysts are watching, investors are watching, and competitors are moving. Gene Munster said it best when he declared, "They've got to deliver a 10 out of 10 when this new Siri comes out." Anything less, and we might be watching the beginning of the end of the most valuable company in the world. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about whether Apple can catch up, or if this is the start of something we'll look back on the way we look back at BlackBerry today. I'll see you in the next one.